But all in all, I think what makes a good image is that it should trigger an emotional response, either positive or negative response in a way that seems fresh and genuine.
Welcome to the Pixel Paper Podcast, a series where we get to know the creative processes behind all types of digital artists, particularly those who are up and coming. My name is Noor, graphic designer and work-in-progress digital artist, and I'll be your host for today. In this last episode, or at least last for now, episode of the podcast, I sit down with award-winning illustrator Jason Chuang. He talks us through his journey from Taiwan to the UK and how he has shifted into illustration alongside the behind the scenes of his artistic process. We dive into his inspirations, cultural backgrounds, as well as how his life experiences have shaped him, including his 4-month military experience, which informed his first and very successful graphic novel. This was a super interesting conversation, and I'm really happy to hiatus the podcast on this episode. So please enjoy this episode with Jason. Hi Jason, how are you?
Good, thanks. You?
Great, I'm great, thank you so much. So for our audience, can you please introduce yourself?
Right, so my name is Jason Chuang, and Jason Chuang Art on Instagram. I am a freelance illustrator from Taiwan, and I'm now based in London.
Great. And I found you through the website It's Nice That, and I really wanted to interview you because when I first saw your work, I really liked how you translated your emotions into your work. I mean, there's like a real feeling when you look at your work. So could you tell us a bit more about your art journey to get to where you are now?
Right, so basically I've been drawing since I was a kid, and when I was 7 or 8-year-old, I met one of the most kind of influential art teachers in my life, and he used to start his classes with storytelling. And I was always like really deeply drawn into these different worlds that he always bring into classes. And I remember in secondary school, I started doing like comic parodies of well-known animes and movies to entertain myself and my friends during classes. Normally classes I find boring, like maths and stuff. However, it wasn't until I was 19 and studying in the UK that I was properly introduced to the world of illustration. And before that, I've always done like, classical painting, classical kind of like fine art stuff. And then I figured out that illustration as a discipline is the best way for me to communicate my ideas and experiences. So I've just kind of stuck by it from then. And then, just been trying to hone on my skills in translating emotions into imageries. And I think people seem to find my work beautiful and somehow like relatable. So which I find kind of weird but wonderful at the same time. And and then after that, the commissions just like kind of gradually start to come in. And so, that's where I am now.
That's cool. You mentioned that you did painting initially, but then you moved to illustration. So could you kind of maybe specify the difference between painting and illustration?
So this is also a very tricky, this is a good question. This is very hard to answer, actually. I remember thinking, illustration, that's drawing, right? And painting, like, so what's the difference between fine art and illustration? I think I read some kind of like articles and stuff about it. And I think the main difference between fine art and illustration is, well, not the main difference, but one way to look at it is fine art kind of poses questions, whereas illustration kind of aims to answer questions in a way. And I think that's how I understand it to a certain degrees, but obviously there's a lot of, like overlapping and interplays and just like illustration and graphic design as well. There's also a lot of overlapping, but for me, illustration as a tool to communicate ideas is kind of I'm drawn to illustration because of its kind of immediacy and like
no, I think that's interesting because even myself, I'm like, I'm not too sure what the difference is, but I think in a way, illustration is like storytelling, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
How would you suggest to other artists, or how did you do it? How did you kind of transform? Is that the right word? How did you convert, let's say, from painting to illustration? Like, was there a process mentally, or how did you kind of switch, let's say?
It's also this kind of tricky question, because sometimes there's not a lot of differentiation in the use of medium. Like I think for illustration, it's a really, really broad term. I mean, for fine art as well, like you can use any medium you want. But for me, I've always painted, like traditionally. And then when I was 19, I did this foundation course, and that's when I found out about illustration. And I discovered the world of like digital art as well. And then after that, I kind of started doing like a mix of traditional and digital. Like I would draw on paper, and then I'll scan it in and then color it digitally. And to now, I'm like kind of mostly I do most of my paintings on my tablet now. And for me, what draws me to illustration is, as I said, it's like immediacy, like how fast it is, how fast it can produce an image with a pungent like image with like a really strong message in a short amount of time. And I think for me, drawing things digitally is a huge advantage, because I am in full control of everything. The composition, from composition to colors, I can change in a second. And then it's a really useful tool for me. And I've heard some people say that digital art is not real art and things like that. But for me, I think digital, well, like the tablet, Photoshop, everything is a tool, and the tools are there for, just like paintbrush, like it's there to assist you, and it's just as valid as any other medium for me, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even I've got that comment, and it bugs me a lot, but I'm trying to like let it go.
Yeah. I had people telling me, "Oh, how did you paint this?" And I was like, "Oh, I painted on my iPad," and they said, "Oh, so like the computer painted for you?" No, I painted every brush stroke myself. So yeah, it's an interesting concept for some people, especially like non-artists. But yeah.
I guess it's because it's so easy to just fake anything digitally these days. So it's hard to kind of convince other people that, yeah, I did this.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you did a master's, right? At Royal College of Art?
Yes.
So what's been the advantage to your art practice in doing a master's?
So I did my master's in visual communication at the Royal College of Art, and I graduated recently this July. And I think what I liked about the RCA the most is the amount of freedom we were given to explore. And that being not only within our discipline, but we're also really encouraged to branch out to other areas and learning and doing things that are not, not familiar to us. For example, during my time at the RCA, I've done a documentary short film. I've collaborated with a bunch of friends, and we made like a graphic novel anthology, and also made an animated short film for my last project, all of which I never thought I would be able to do or even thought about doing before going to the RCA. And it's because of how much they encourage and kind of like guide you and kind of push you out of your comfort zone. That really helped me, branch out and getting to know other people and collaborating with people from different disciplines and learning from each other. I think that's kind of the most valuable things. And it also makes me think about the other possibilities with illustration as well, and how I can continue pushing the boundaries within my own discipline as well. So yeah, that's what I gained from the RCA.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like, I guess it's basically the community that you got, the community aspect.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure if you mentioned this whilst we started recording, but you're a freelance artist right now. So how do you do you get to do collaboration now that you've graduated and you're freelancing?
Right. So for collaborations, I think right now, I do commissions. So they're mostly like, a client will be giving me a brief, and then I do one image, a single image or series of images, responding to the brief. So I think it's more, I wouldn't call it collaboration. It's more like, like just the
Yeah.
standard commission. But collaboration wise, I am thinking about, because I'm really, because like narrative storytelling is kind of my thing. So I'm thinking about doing another collaborative project with my friends, but it's still in a thinking stage. So nothing has been concrete yet. But yeah, I've just been kind of busy working on these commissions at the moment. So yeah.
Cool. And I mean, speaking of your commissions and your work, you have won a whole host of awards. I mean, for our audience, just to name a few, Jason's won the Cheltenham Illustration Award, the Creative Quarterly Issue 62, and he's also been shortlisted for many others. So in your opinion, as an award-winning artist, what distinguishes or makes award-winning artwork?
I think I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, the most important part of an image, especially in illustration, is the message that it's trying to convey. And the image has to be able to do that firstly. And also it has to have something that sparks intrigue, something that speaks to me and makes me want to stop and think about what it is trying to communicate. But it doesn't need to be like super obvious. In fact, most of the time I prefer if the thing that I'm looking at isn't obvious at first glance. As personally, I'm very interested in coding with images and giving objects or seeing meanings and reading into the subtext. But all in all, I think what makes a good image is that it should trigger an emotional response, either positive or negative response in a way that seems fresh and genuine. And I actually went to an exhibition yesterday. It's called Paintings Now, and it's got like 20 or something like contemporary artists' work in there. And they're all like, like really, really experimental and really pushing the boundary of fine arts. And I saw this, I think she's from Belgium artist. And like there's like a quote of hers that I think really like spoke to me as well, because that's how I see art. And it's so she said it's important for image to be problematic, otherwise it satisfies you and you're left with nothing. And so I think this is like kind of a great line to throw in there in response to what I just said.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's about leaving something for the viewer. Like that's the point of artwork. There should be a dialogue, right?
Yeah, it's like show, don't tell, and it's important to know when to reveal or how much to not show, and to leave it for the imagination and to be open with the image.
Yeah, I mean, I recently learned of that concept from a class that I was taking, and it kind of hit me as let's say an ordinary art viewer, because let's say non-artists, when they go to art galleries, they look at paintings and they're like, why is it like this? Like, why is it so confusing? But that's the point, in a way.
Yeah. That's how it leaves an impression on you, and that's what draws you, like make people think, in my opinion. Yeah.
True. And you mentioned that you like to put in, let's say, subconscious or abstract messaging into your work, but how do you come up with imagery that's not abstract? Like you come up with imagery that's very, realistic. There's a subject to it. It's something that you can see in real life, like, for example, flower petals or trees or whatever. So how do you kind of translate that?
Okay. So I think it all goes to the way I work. So to start with, I'm very interested in the surrealist movement, and because it really speaks to the way that I work and the way that I think, because my imageries are highly reliant on the subconscious. And so when I start like taking my like personal work, for example, the process of it is always, when I start, is quite intuitive. So I have this kind of visual diary that I keep by the side of my bed, and I literally doodle on it at the end of every day. And it's all about it's basically recording my whole day, like my emotion, kind of distilled into like one single A5 piece of paper, and sometimes it doesn't even make sense. And sometimes I can see kind of life within them, and I take them further and kind of develop them. And then I guess for me, I like surrealist movement because it's kind of got this like dreamlike quality, and I see it in a lot of my doodles as well, and I kind of just take it further and then develop it from there. And I use a lot of like references as well. Like I take photos and to try and match, like the thing that I draw, and then somehow just combine them together. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that perfectly answers. I think I really appreciate the way that you, I mean, I don't know if you intentionally did that, but you had very clear-cut answers. Like you take reference photos, you follow the surrealist movement, and you also, I really like that tip of keeping a visual journal beside your bed. That's a really nice tip. Yeah, and I mean, I can see the surrealist influences in your work. Like it's very dreamlike, and also your color schemes, they tend to have this very soothing pastel quality. But interestingly, you expressed in an article that you have difficulty with color. So how do you kind of balance this problem, let's say?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm not very good with color, actually. And it's good that you mentioned that, because when it comes to coloring artwork, I'm like a kid. I just want to use all the colors, as many as possible, like naturally. Yeah. But I've come to realization that the use of color is very important in communication. So that I started to restrict it like more and more colors when I use them, and start to look at like classical paintings and poster illustrations, like retro posters. And I realized that they use very minimal and simplistic palettes. And so I tried to adopt that to my own work. And it's also like a constant trial and error for me, as I usually change the colors quite a lot before arriving at the final resolution of my work. So the coloring stage also usually take a long time before the final piece for me.
Okay, that's interesting. And I mean, a lot of your work seems to be directly influenced by Japanese woodblock prints. Like, I mean, the only one I know is Hokusai, but can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So I think either Japanese or like Japanese woodblock print, as you said, or Chinese ink paintings, or just like in general, like medieval Oriental art, it really inspired me hugely, because I love its interplay between essence and absence. It's like a kind of Eastern painting kind of way of painting. It's very, very different from like classical European kind of way of painting, because it's aimed to capture the spirit of essence of the object or subjects. And it's all about like leaving blank spaces to breathe and achieving a harmonious and well-composed scene. And then this part influenced me. This part of the influence has always been at the backseat, and I've been trying to bring in elements from this period of Asian art more consciously for the past couple of years, 3 years, as my own heritage. And there was actually a kind of turning point in my practice when I went to New York, because before that I've never been conscious about what kind of look I want for my work, or like style, if you want to call it. I've never really thought about my work as, like Asian or anything like that. But during the trip to New York, I met this really high profile art director. And he basically told me that my work is too Asian and that it won't sell of its Asian look. And then that really struck me as I never thought that, like, first of all, I never thought my work looked Asian. Second of all, I didn't know it would be deemed as a negative quality to have. But after that experience, I said to myself that, okay, I'm going to draw more and more influence from my, own background. And I don't care what people say, I think being Asian is nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually something to be proud of. And I want to use my unique voice, and my platform to kind of inspire other Asian artists or creators to, just like show their own culture. And yeah, and I think people really appreciate my art. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, the art director was completely wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really shocked when I heard that, and I didn't know how to react in the beginning. And when I told my friends, some of them were even telling me that, oh, you shouldn't take it so personally. Maybe art directors, maybe they know best. But I really don't think that's the case. I think I really think it's wrong. Yeah.
That's a really interesting experience that you brought up, because I mean, okay, I'm going to use this word, but racism is manifest in so many ways and we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that you brought that up, because there are so many instances in all of our daily lives as, let's say, people of color, where we don't realize that someone's, let's say, looking down on our culture. And so it's important that we learn to identify those points. And I think you've responded in a beautiful way. You completely dismissed his comments and you've completely embraced your identity. I think that's great.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. So I think you've answered the question, actually, how does your cultural background play a role? But actually, let's dive into it a bit more. Would you say that you're Taiwanese, right?
Yeah.
So would you say your Taiwanese background in particular influences your art?
I wouldn't say that much, because, well, obviously it has a lot of it. I grew up in Taiwan, so yeah. So my experience prior moving to the UK is living in Taiwan as a Taiwanese person, and there's nothing as like defined as Asian art for me, because everything I see is just surrounding me is Asian art and teachers, and and yeah. After I moved to the UK, it's I can talk a bit about my experience being an Asian artist in a Western society.
Sure.
So yeah, back in Taiwan in art classes, I was taught to paint like classically, both in like Asian and Western art medium. And it's interesting because I've always preferred the Western way of painting growing up. And then now I think about all the things I've experienced growing up. After moving to the UK, I think art is the only thing that I've never been judged negatively due to my race, except the incidents I told you that was happening in the book. So I've never thought about my work as particularly Asian or non-Asian before that. And since it really hasn't been the focus of my work anyway. And yeah, and since the incidents, I realized having an Asian background is like an integral part of me. And it certainly influenced my experience being in Western society since I was young. And yeah, so since the experience, I've just been trying to integrate my background into my work. And but I think when I try to create, I think people really appreciate what I do, because part of it is because I try to be as genuine as possible when it comes to creating. And the kind of Chinese/Japanese inspired like style, I really don't like using this word. We can come to that later, but the style in my work is a vehicle for me to deliver my message. And it makes me really happy when people tell me that they resonate with certain emotions they feel while looking at my work. because I think it's wonderful when my audience can see past the aesthetic and they can really get a hold on what I'm trying to say with my work, and to have those connection with strangers I've never even met. It's a magical thing, I think. Yeah, and I think I'm increasingly trying to experiment with what I can do and pushing myself to break out of the category some people might label me as. Some very different work that I've done is coming, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see them soon. In terms of the style of my work, I think, so I think I answered the question. I'm not sure.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. It's your answer, so.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes the person to be pulled out of their culture to realize how much that culture influences them.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, like for example, I moved from the UK to Dubai, and like that kind of made me realize, like my identity and Britishness and Indianness and whatever else, so that's interesting. Yeah, and you talked about how people resonate with your work and the message behind it, and that's exactly why I wanted to interview you, because in particular there's this graphic novel that you've done. I forgot the name of it now, but it really reminds me of The Arrival by Sean Tan. It's the one where you sketched it in pencil and black and white.
Yeah.
The Boy, exactly. I wrote The Boy, and then I was like, is that the title? I don't know. But anyway.
It is,
oh my goodness, I love that work. It has this really nice style that's exactly the same as The Arrival. Have you read that book?
Yeah, I love The Arrival content, actually. I'm really honored that my book reminds you of his work, because I'm also a big fan of Sean Tan.
Can you tell us more about this work?
Yeah, sure. So The Boy was my first ever graphic novel, and it was made during my second year in BA back in 2018. And the idea came from my military experience back in Taiwan. It wasn't long, it was only like 4 months, but it was bad enough for me. And I later on altered it in a way that is more universal and approachable. And then, so The Boy is a 68-page graphic novel, completely done with pencil. And it tells the story of the boy who has a vivid imagination, but he feels trapped in life. And the story kind of just follows his journey in and out of his daydreams until at some point in the story, he vanishes. And the ending is open, but all the clues as to what happened to the boy is embedded within the story. It's a piece that's very dear to me, as the story itself is very personal. And I'm just surprised by the amount of positive feedback I've got for this book, and even winning an award for it was like a dream for me back then. And
I think it's the work that perhaps comes from the most emotion that we don't necessarily give a lot of weight to, that is the work that everyone really appreciates.
Yeah. And I was just like really struck by all the, like waves of positive feedback and people asking me, even though it's like sold out completely now, I still get people asking me if I would do any, run of it more in the future.
Even I want one.
Yeah, I might actually do in the future. But thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the military as well, because I had another guest, he was South Korean, and he also did a military service, and that kind of influenced his art journey as well, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's the, how you spend your time there, and time kind of just stretches. And it's a surreal experience, and I think it definitely kind of helped me creatively. Like, I wouldn't have done this novel, so I'm thankful for the experience, but in the same time, I'm like, what a complete waste of time.
But I feel like you need that time to step away and do nothing in order to be able to create. For
me, I have this I I think a lot of artists have this as well, like kind of unhealthy relationship with work. Um, so like if I have worked for a while, I'll feel really, really bad, and then I'll overwork myself, and then it's like a vicious cycle basically. And when I was in the ministry, I didn't do much, so I all I could do was when like I'm staying in the line, doing things everybody else is doing, like following the orders. I'll basically drift all in my head and imagine all kinds of different strange scenario, like how I would fly away when I'm doing the jumping jacks, and when I look outside at night when I woke up at the moon, I kind of started to see bars appearing on the moon as well. That kind of thing. Those things are kind of all included inside the book.
Yeah, I mean, this question's kind of specific, but okay, so you mentioned like when you had orders and stuff and like you drift off in your head. So how did you, there was obviously a time lag between when you drew this and when you had those emotions. So how did you kind of translate that from your head to the paper despite the time lag?
Okay, that's a very good question. So I think the easier way to answer this is I write it down in words first. So when I was in the ministry, I brought in like kind of like a small sketchbook. And then when I have these ideas, I just write it down because writing is faster for me to record ideas rather than drawing. I also have a kind of like folder in my phone that's just like full of ideas. And they're all writings. And I guess that's how I do it. Yeah, to like hold on to the ideas, I guess.
So you have a lot of different visual styles. Like you have the boy, which is one aesthetic, and then you have these Chinese, Japanese style illustrations. So which style do you prefer using?
I think for me, what I choose to do, it really depends on the subject matter. As I think my work is naturally surreal and dreamlike, and as I said, I draw a lot of inspiration from my subconscious mind and the surrealist movement. And what I'm concerned about the most is how to put across a message most effectively. And so everything else comes as a secondary, including styles. And I really don't like to pigeonhole myself. So even though people might have labels for me already, I don't plan to stay within the same lane for too long.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because what I've realized in doing this podcast is I've personally, because I started doing art because of Instagram and stuff, and what you see on Instagram is just one aesthetic. So a person has one aesthetic, so you think as a viewer that this person just does this style of art. But then when I started interviewing artists, I realized, okay, artists actually have a lot of different styles and it's completely okay. Yeah. So I find this question quite interesting to ask.
Yeah. It's good that you said this because I actually draw very differently in my sketchbook, and I also draw on cardboard as well, and I use
cool.
and crayons, but I rarely post them because not that I don't like them, I actually really, really like them, but they just I don't think they suit the kind of aesthetic on my Instagram, and my Instagram is the place where I get all my work from. So I think what I post there is more like marketable, or it looked like coherent, like all together on my page. It's kind of like my portfolio. So it's very selective what I post on my Instagram.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, it's fine. Like, again, same as you, I do a lot of different types of work and I don't post a lot of it on Instagram. And I think, I think that's fine to be selective about it. Definitely. Yeah. Your work as well seems to encompass themes which are very philosophical. I mean, we did get into that. So how would you recommend artists who, especially those who mainly focus on drawing from, let's say, from life or from photo references, how would you kind of suggest for them to express their emotions visually?
I think I mentioned I have a visual diary before. So visual diary, I literally just doodle, and sometimes I draw lines that don't even make sense maybe to other people. I think it's a way for me to loosen up because my style naturally is quite tight. And I use the visual diary to kind of take my mind off and let my pen kind of guide my hands and just draw whatever and not care about it as much, because I know no one will ever see them unless I share them. And so apart from that, I think everybody works and thinks differently. I think there's no one way of doing things. Some suggestions might work for some, but not so good for others. For example, downside of myself is that when I draw things from my head straight away. And a lot of the times, I think I'm really lacking in observational drawings. So for some people, they might be great at, for example, if you tell them to draw like houses, architectures, they might draw, straight away from their head, something that looks convincing. But for me, I can't do that because I personally, I hate drawing architectures. I hate drawing buildings. I have to take pictures or look at reference photos to draw it. Like I can't draw it straight away. And the same with people. I'm not great at drawing people. So I always have to take reference pictures. But for some people, they're good at it because they practice it. So that's kind of like the downside of my practice. And that's something that I need to do more, like observational drawings. So, but the best advice I think I can give to like any young creatives or artists is just to be yourself and to be genuine, trust and value your feelings. And I think don't try to be someone else, because I see a lot of like popular illustration styles, and I feel like a lot of people are copying them, and it's kind of like around, it's a popular, and it's popular for a reason, like it might be really like marketable, and it's fine to do them, but I think it's also really important to be true to yourself and keep that part of me, and not let that go. I think emotions are tricky to express because they are universal, but in the same time, the reason why you have them can be so personal. And I think for me, I've never been someone who's shy of expressing my emotions hugely, because I use a lot of symbols. They're almost like shields. And so that when the viewers, when they look at my work, they can get an overall message, but never the whole picture, I think. But yeah, that's how I do it. But if emotions on people's bag, or if you feel too vulnerable to draw them, I think that's totally okay as well.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about the people just copy trends that are happening right now, and I think definitely social media is the culprit for that. People just want to be like Instagram artists, basically.
Yeah, it's quite sad to see people losing their own voice or like their authenticity, just to hop on this trend, and then after a while you realize it's like looking like everybody else's page, and I don't think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, like, you don't really find satisfaction in it after a while. Like, I mean, I can definitely say from my own experience, I started art on Instagram, and I mean, I was doing it before, but I properly started doing it after Instagram. And after a while, I just started doing it for, the aesthetic and whatever. And it was only after I started this podcast, which was in June of 2021, this year, I realized that, I have this voice, and I'm listening to all these artists talk about their voice. So then I started discovering my own artistic voice. And it's been so liberating to do that and not post as much on Instagram. So I'm just saying this for the audience, to realize that don't fall into this trap. It's terrible.
And also, I think on Instagram, because you can find a lot of amazing artists, and I follow a lot of amazing illustrators I really look up to. And sometimes, as you said, you can fall into like traps of like following, or like thinking, that's the trend, I should get on that. Or when you see really amazing artists and you compare yourself to them, and that's very, very bad. That can really harm your like self-esteem. You can really harm your work as well. And I think it's important to remember what people post on social media is like a fraction of their work. Like, obviously, the successful artists, they will only post the beautiful images, the beautiful illustration that I've made. They won't ever show you when they are like struggling, when they have like creative blocks, or when their work that they produce, they just don't like as much, or they think it's shit. They won't show those. So it's important to remember that you only see the good stuff on Instagram. So yeah, it's important to remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a quote that I heard which said, "You're comparing your 100% to their 10%." Because that's what you're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and as the final question, what would you like to see yourself doing in the future, or how would you like your artistic career to progress?
Right. So at the moment, as I have just graduated, I am trying to figure my way out of this, or way into this like freelance kind of career, and I'm still navigating through it. It's quite complicated because I can go into details into this, but I don't think we have the time. But so yeah, but I have long-term goals. For me, narrative is really my passion. And I've recently been published by Selmy Hero in their graphic novel anthology Catalyst, and they included one of my short comics that I did.
Congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of like a big achievement for me, and I think what I want to do in the future is to have my own story published. I write a lot of stories, and yeah, to have a graphic novel with just my work, and eventually seeing my work in big screen. That would be great. Yeah, like I would like to collaborate with kind of like directors or writers in the future, or become a writer or like storyboard artist for film, like narrative-led projects. That's where I see myself in the future, and hopefully I'll be there, get there in the future as well.
Yeah, I really hope so too. I really hope that all works out.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much, Jason, for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think we had a really great conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something beneficial out of it, and that you do check out Jason's work. All the links are in the description, and I will see you next week for an episode where I will just wrap up this segment of the podcast, and I'll just be talking a bit about why I'm going to hiatus the podcast and all of that. So I'll see you next week for that one. Bye.